Hello, sweet parents. Welcome to the When Our Adult Children Walk Away podcast. My name is Dr. Janet Steinkamp, and during each episode of When Our Adult Children Walk Away, I will provide my professional and personal insights, information and opportunities for your self-reflection and growth, tips and tricks to make every day count, and encouragement to keep moving forward. I'm here to help you dig deep and get down to the root causes so that you can find your way out of the darkness to a positive and lasting relationship. Grab your notebook and a pen, settle into your favorite chair, and let's get to it. In this episode, we are looking at some of the similarities and differences between how moms and dads experience estrangement. We know from research and from our conversations with moms and with dads that there are some fairly specific differences in how we understand estrangement, how we approach estrangement, how we deal with the times of quiet, and how we come back together better prepared to reconnect and reestablish some kind of communication with our estranged adult children. Now, it's a given that many people who are listening are no contact. They've not had contact for a while, or it's new, but there's no contact. They've been issued that statement. And then we have many people who are just finding themselves on the continuum of estrangement or somewhere along the continuum. Many of us are looking at ways to slow down the advancement of the fracturing, to stabilize the relationship, or to prepare ourselves and look for opportunities to demonstrate that we have done the work that we've been asked to do, and we're ready to rebuild some of that trust. So here's a quick overview of what the research tells us and what fathers tell us in research studies are the general experiences and dynamics that fathers experience. So from a cultural perspective, many fathers feel pressure to adhere to the traditional roles of being the head of the family, strong, emotionally solid, not easily hurt or impacted by negative behavior, and this makes it harder for fathers to express their feelings about estrangement. So often it's not that our dads aren't feeling things or aren't feeling deeply the loss and the grief. It's difficult for people who are in the position where they feel that pressure to communicate their feelings. Relationship dynamics for dads. Often our fathers report that they feel distance from their children even before estrangement, and especially if they're not the primary caregiver. And all along during the child's upbringing, were they involved? Were they available? Was there work-life balance? I was raising my children through the 90s and the early 2000s. There was much more focus on balanced work life for both moms and dads. However, in my case, I chose to stay home. We ate a lot of macaroni and cheese. We didn't know how we were going to pay the bills sometimes, but we chose to minimize as much of the daycare obligations as we could. So each circumstance in each family is different. So think about how your own relationship dynamics with your children's dads who are listening, how that might have impacted your relationship with your children. How we process grief can be different. So our fathers are more focused on their internal processing, and they channel a lot of the loss into activities or work. Being active, not sedentary, not writing necessarily, although writing can be an activity. I have a number of dads I work with who are writers and musicians. So whatever that active experience is for our dads, whatever it is they do that is active, that tends to be where they put their energy. Now, sometimes this can lead to avoidance, right? We busy ourselves, and you can't busy away grief. You can't success away grief. Grief sits and waits. It does not evaporate. It sits and festers. You know, I say, what stays in the dark grows in the dark. So we need to really shine light on how we're feeling, even in those deepest corners, and say out loud our fears, our contributions, our regrets, our anger, all of those things. So for dads and for moms who try to busy themselves out of the feelings and experience of estrangement and estrangement grief, that is a concern, right? So we need to find ways to process that. Fathers, in their reconnection challenges, they may struggle more in initiating reconciliation. And often what we're told from dads, from the fathers, is that the discomfort comes from being vulnerable. They're very uncomfortable expressing vulnerability, demonstrating that they're vulnerable, and they don't know how to approach emotional conversations. We don't necessarily teach in the generation of my listeners, so my general demographic is 44 to 65 or 68. We weren't taught necessarily how to process externally emotions. I grew up in a Germanic family, and until my mom and dad came along, people didn't say I love you. They just didn't say it. So now let's look at the moms. So the moms' cultural expectations are often more emotionally anchored. They are more responsible in the family for identifying and expressing emotions. This can heighten their feeling of guilt or shame because why didn't they catch it? How did I miss it? How did I not know that was going on? How did I not know that my adult child was feeling the way they were feeling? Now, dads can feel that way too. I have a husband who's a social worker, trained as a social worker, and he's very emotionally connected. And so he's actually more likely to express his emotions than I am. So again, we're just talking about generalizations here and differences between fathers and mothers. The relationship dynamics for moms tends to be closer, more emotionally intimate, and they are more bonded to their children. So in a nutshell, the difference between fathers and mothers, or moms and dads, in this, the relational dynamic, is that dads might feel a more chronic, ongoing, low-grade sadness. If we combine this with what we know about estrangement grief, they may sit in that anger stage more often, become more defensive, the how could they do this to us? And moms are more likely to feel the loss and the emotions of estrangement more acutely. Our moms are responsible for doing the emoting. This may also be reflected in the fact that 92% of the parents who reach out for assistance with estrangement are moms. They often reach out on behalf of their partner or the dad or the father, but predominantly it's the moms out there doing the research, reading the books, doing the listening. I do have dads that come to me that I work with who are divorced from the bio mom, and so they are really on their own in that often the mom who's divorced is not interested in caring for them. She is not going to take care of that ex-husband's needs. Once in a while, we find people who co-parent, and they're really in this together. And actually, I don't know that it's that rare. It's just that I don't hear from those folks very often. Let's talk about processing grief, where dads, like I said, tend to get stuck in that, either the denial or the anger, and they might get stuck in despair. The moms are more likely to seek emotional outlets, right? So they're not going to busy themselves. They're not going to, by being busy, work their way out of estrangement. They can't busy themselves out of estrangement, like we said. The moms are more likely to want to talk about it, write about it, join a support group, maybe engage in therapy to process their feelings. And it's not unusual that I hear from moms that their husbands just don't want to talk about it anymore. They are done talking about it. They're done trying to figure it out. The weight of it is too much. I also hear that with moms and dads who are very professionally engaged, who carry a great deal of pressure in their work, or maybe they have many other children. And so the demand on their time and energy is much greater than, for example, my husband and myself. I was retired at the time, and we had just moved to a new city. The pandemic was just hitting. And so we had a lot of time on our hands to process and talk. We about drove each other crazy. So that's not a good thing either. It's just that there are differences, and that's what I want to highlight here. So let's talk about their shared experience for a minute. Again, we're talking about general overview. Both moms and dads may feel deep grief. There are maybe some of you listening who are like, good riddance, I'm glad it's over. But predominantly, the people who listen to my podcast or who I work with, regardless of mom or dad, feel deep grief. They're confused. They're feeling helpless. And their reactions really depend on their individual personality. So what I'm talking about in these differences is the tip of the iceberg. All of our circumstances in estrangement are different, all of them. There are themes in many estrangements that are similar. We can fairly confidently talk about boundaries and respect and communication in most any estranged relationship. We can talk about, perhaps in different floundering relationships, money, control, power, geography, influence of outside folks, or differences in values, although that one is spiking too ever since the election. We're seeing a lot of estrangements now beginning to be associated with the value differences politically. So in my work as a coach, I tend to notice some specific patterns, some themes, like I said, or trends that align with these distinctions. Dads are often more quiet and withdrawn. They may speak up on occasion. Oftentimes, they don't even face me on camera, or they're hesitant to come on camera because all of my work is done by virtual connection these days. And moms are typically the initiators, the introducers. They pay the invoices. They make sure that the appointments are scheduled and the Zoom works. They're much more the leader in the work that goes on. Doesn't mean that dads aren't doing their work or that they are disengaged or uninvested. I'd like to talk about now some recommendations in how we navigate these differences in estrangement. Often we focus on the power struggle with dads. There's a lot of talk about the emotional power structure. So for my husband, it was, how could they do this? They make these huge decisions and they don't even ask for my counsel. They don't even let me know they're doing them. And it made him feel bad. It made him feel like all of his wisdom and the care he took to parent these now adult children, and he was feeling very discounted and rejected. So we talk through that. We focus on that. The emotional pain might manifest more in frustration or withdrawal. So the key focus with dads when I'm working with them tends to be journaling. We talk a lot about setting up an email account, self-talk, therapy and coaching. I find that dads are more typically, more action-oriented. What are we going to do? What's the strategy? Can you make a phone call? Can I send in a friend? They're much more action-focused. So the challenge there for me as a coach is that I know if an adult child has said no contact, the fastest way to speed up the clock toward potential reconnection or opening up communication is silence. And very few fathers can take that easily. Very few. So we might try some action, right? We might write a letter. They may want to go address their son or daughter head on. And when I say son or daughter, I understand there are different gender identities. I'm using old language there, so I apologize if I'm discounting anyone. And then when we see that those actions tend to backfire and actually cost more time, then often the dad or father will come around and they will begin to understand that it's more important for them to learn to navigate the silence and work on refining their communication skills, identifying and understanding boundaries, all of those things we talk about. Now, for moms, who have, especially those who have a history of more emotional intimacy and more intimate communication, they may unintentionally overreach or smother their adult child, right? So we tend to be the overhelpers. I own it. I was a helicopter mom when they were little, and I moved right into overhelper as they got older. I mean, it's ridiculous when I look back, and I've still struggled with it. I struggle with it in every aspect of my life. My husband, my kids, coworkers, people who work for me. I need to remember my lane. And overhelping unless it's invited, help is not necessarily helpful. So with our moms then, we help temper that approach. We talk about understanding and recognizing the invitation to help, the willingness to allow us to help, and when to stop. Like what the adult child is agreeing to, like make a few phone calls for me and report back. Or is it make a few phone calls and make a bunch of arrangements and then report back, right? Very different. So when we rebuild communication, we start looking at those communication skills. Those are the kinds of things we start looking at. When we talk about cultivating patience and consistency, the dads, again, tend to be very action-oriented, and they want to lead. They want to lead with frustration, and they get even more frustrated when progress feels slow or unstructured. We talked about that. So the key focus there is to teach dads the value of small, consistent efforts. We talk about demonstrating self-control, respect, and with dads, often it's respect of a partner that they don't necessarily like and who may not be very respectful to them. This partner might be very discounting and dismissive and rude. And I've seen often, I don't know if I can say often, I have seen frequently enough that it's worth mentioning that adult partners can become fairly abusive verbally and draw lines the parents are not to cross, that the parent will say, if my adult son or daughter was by themselves, they would not be saying this. They would not. I know they would not. And then we explore that. What would they be saying? And how do we know they wouldn't be saying that? And is there a chance that they're asking this partner to speak on their behalf? So the one of the key factors for moms is to maintain their emotional warmth, respect boundaries, and not become kind of guilt peddlers, help peddlers, to take the no with grace and acceptance and go on about their business. So when we talk about cultivating patience and consistency, we talk about with moms the difference between giving space and giving up. Giving space is not giving up. Recognizing boundaries is very different than giving up. Recognizing boundaries builds space for us to create boundaries too. And this is incremental, again, small and consistent steps, but respecting boundaries does not mean giving up. You can get mad one day and say, I'm done. I feel it. You feel it. Many people are feeling it when they come to me. I just want to quit. I can't stand this anymore. I cannot stand the pain, the insult, the continued rejection. I can't stand it anymore. So then we take a minute, give yourself some space, and step away from it. And then we strategize how to know when to come back and how. Or if people want to come back, you don't have to. It is your choice. I am going to record another episode, an extended episode on the let them go movement versus the let them go good riddance theory. Look for that episode coming up as well. Let's talk about the focus on self-improvement. When I talk about doing our work, it's kind of my phrase that I use when I'm talking about how we focus on self-improvement. It's not that we're bad people. We may not have understood what was going on at the time. We may not have recognized the warning signs. We didn't understand what they were saying to us. I mean, my daughter said to me once, Mom, people do walk away from their families. And I was like, yep, I know. And I didn't even miss a beat. It just echoes in my head. Didn't occur to me it would be us. Didn't occur to me she was talking about us. And she was. So now I have to really reflect on those things and listen differently. Listen to learn. What does that mean? What does that mean in relation to our relationship? And so often people need encouragement in this. It is not easy to let ourselves be vulnerable enough, especially during an estrangement, to say, I did some things I wish I hadn't done. I said some things in ways I wish I hadn't. Now I understand how they heard me. Now I understand the filter that my words and emotional expression went through to my adult son or daughter and how they experienced what I was trying to communicate. Total disconnect. misalignment. We were not on the same page, and I didn't even know it. So what I will say there is that hindsight does not need to weigh you down. That hindsight is a gift, because recognizing it and recognizing our blind spots is the first step in saying, oh my gosh, I need to do something differently. And how is this affecting me in other relationships? Do other people experience me this way? And you can ask, and most likely they will say, no, you're fine. Don't worry about it. I don't know what they're talking about. And the question isn't for them. The question is for ourselves. Are we showing up in our other relationships in ways that are best for the relationship? Are we listening to learn from the other person in the relationship? Are we taking to heart what they're saying and taking a minute to reflect back instead of listening to answer them, listening to respond? Are we slowing ourselves down to listen? I speak with people every day who will say to me, I know I did things wrong, but why don't I get some grace? They do things wrong all the time. Why don't I hear from them that they're sorry? Why don't they have a responsibility in this? Well, they do. However, we need to act first. We need to be the role models. We need to be the ones demonstrating vulnerability, transparency, self-accountability, and self-improvement, learning, improving, changing. This is not a fast process. The research by DiClemente and Thomas demonstrated that change, and by the way, their research was based on the smoking cessation programs of the 70s. They really were behind the governmental movement toward notifying the public that smoking was unhealthy and helping with the cessation program. So their research is well respected. They demonstrated in their findings that changed behavior, for our behavior to change in a way that it is our new default. When we're under pressure and stress, we default to the new behavior. The old behavior is replaced. Takes 18 months, somewhere between 9 and 18 months, maybe 2 years. That's why smoking cessation was so difficult. Or yes, stopping smoking or any kind of addiction is so difficult. We're not only fighting biology and learned dependence, but we're changing our behaviors. So we need to build a support system, right? Moms and dads do this differently. Dads are less likely to seek the support of a group, be in a Facebook group, maybe a Facebook group, actually. I see and hear from a lot of dads in Facebook groups. And by the way, word of caution, sidebar, I want you to be very careful if you're an active member in the current estrangement Facebook and virtual groups, that you take care of yourself and filter out the content and responses that pull you down. Support groups do not pull us down. They lift us up. They reinforce the positive, and they may make suggestions on how to do things differently. But that doesn't weigh us down. That gives us insight and information we need to move forward. Moms are more likely to seek out friends, family, formal groups, the Facebook groups, therapy, and do some constructive problem solving. Again, if what you've been doing is Facebook groups, please consider it carefully. Please consider it carefully. There are groups out there that are so massive, it's very difficult for the owners to monitor. It's my own soapbox there. Let's talk about reconciliation and how we approach it. Moms and dads approach reconciliation differently. Dads often hesitate to reach out due to that fear of more rejection. They don't want any more rejection. Moms may attempt reconciliation too quickly. They may find it much more difficult to stop the texting. I recently talked with a couple who acknowledged that they were over-communicators, and that was one of the issues in their adult child's leaving. That's what the adult child had said. You've got to give me space. This is too much. I can't respond to you every day. I can't read them every day. It's too much. And the mom and dad found it very difficult to disengage from that. And they were talking to me a couple sessions in, and they said, we did just start giving space. And I said, what is that? What does space look like to you? The response was 24 hours. That's a great first step. I don't think that adult child would see that as adequate space. I think it's unlikely. Another family was talking about how many family members were contacting this estranged person, and that there wasn't, it's out of your control, right? You can't make other people stop. That's true. However, they tell us they notice when mom and dad are giving them space. They were the first estrangement typically, siblings typically second or third, other family members, friends, the circles go out in concentric circles. So the two key people in this are the mom and the dad when they are engaged and involved in the relationship or a relationship with their adult child. So we really work on how we approach reconciliation thoughtfully, strategically, slowly, bite by bite, and with our big girl panties or our, we man up, whatever the terms are people are using. And so you have to have a little bit of thick skin when you reach out, because they may not respond. They may not respond for 6 months. They may not respond for a year. So when you send a communication, you have to have that resilience. In summary, I just want to say again, there are differences in how we all experience estrangement, first of all, and there are differences in how moms and dads experience estrangement. Very different. And there are differences in how our estranged child responds to moms and dads, right? Where we see about 86% of estrangements and with some level of reconnection between moms and their adult children, we don't see that high percentage between especially sons and estranged dads. There's more difficulty reconnecting, letting down defenses, showing and leading with our heart and our feelings, and letting each other in. I want to thank you for tuning in this episode. We're going to talk a lot more about the differences, and I've been asked by some dads to do specific podcast episodes for dads. How do they become brave enough to become vulnerable? What do they practice? How do they show that? What is being vulnerable without expressing guilt? There are all kinds of things that we can talk on or work on, I should say, between dads and myself. There are many other extended podcasts available to you. I am beginning in January of 2025 a subscription aspect. So the short versions of my podcasts will be open and free to the public. The extended versions will be behind a subscription. So people will need to pay monthly, a nominal fee, less than 2 cups of coffee at Starbucks, and then they will have access to all the extended versions. Also, I'm starting some interviews. I'm calling the interviews Conversations We Needed to Have. The concept is that if we'd known these things in the beginning, when our relationship was beginning to be stressed, we could have reacted differently. So I bring in experts and my adult daughter, who's back and has some very interesting insights to share. So those episodes or those interviews, recorded interviews, will be available after the first of the year, 2025. They will be a pay-per-view, again, less than 1 cup of coffee at Starbucks. And I hope that you will invest in this information and in yourself. Come join me for these conversations, podcasts, and interviews, and learn some more detailed, in-depth information. Be strong, be brave. You are not alone, and I am here working on this with you every day.